Hi there, viewers. Zach Berly here with Carolina Forward Interviews, where we talk with our elected officials about the issues of today, the future of our state, and why it is that they do what they do. Today with me, I am pleased to be here with Wesley Harris, representative from South Charlotte, Mecklenburg County, 105th District. First of all, Representative, thank you so much for being here.
It's great to be here. Thanks for asking me.
We will talk a little bit more about the other things that are occupying your time as well as being a representative. But first, always like to open up with just tell us a little about yourself, your background, your interests.
Yeah, so I'm a North Carolina native. I grew up I was born in rural Alexander County, about probably like an hour and a half north of Charlotte, if you're familiar with the foothills of North Carolina, and from about like third grade on, lived in Iredell County. So my mom was a public school teacher, and my dad was a local banker, and so public service has always been something that's kind of called to me. Particularly having a mom in education and growing up in the Jim Hunt years, the late 80s and 90s when we really were a state that really focused on investing in our people. And so I was always drawn to it in a way, and my dad being a banker, that's always kind of drove me to finance. And so I went to Carolina for undergrad, always felt I was going to get into politics, didn't really know quite the path I was going to go, and went in Carolina thinking it's okay, let's do some poli-sci major, go to law school, and then go on my way. But when I got to Carolina, I really fell in love with economics. It was actually the first class I ever took at Carolina, and it fit all my passions together. It fit history, politics, and math. You just combine those all together, and you get economics. And so I fell in love with it, and so went through Carolina, majored in econ, and my senior year at Carolina was 2008-2009, which was literally the collapse of the global financial system and the economy. And so any job perspectives I thought I was going to have kind of went out the window, and said, okay, well let's recalibrate. And I decided to go to grad school and go get my PhD in economics. And so I went down to Clemson and got my PhD in econ, focusing on public finance and tax systems. And then after that, I really didn't know what my path was going to be. I taught for a little while at the University of South Carolina. Moved up to Boston, was an economic consultant, doing international tax stuff and intellectual property stuff. And when I moved up there, I thought I'd be up there for a while. It's like, okay, here's a 5-year plan. Let's see how it is. But as soon as I got up there, as much as I loved Boston, the city, being the history nerd that I am, I was like, this isn't home, and this isn't what I want to do long term. And so I wanted to get back to North Carolina. And so in 2016, actually I believe it was Labor Day 2016, was able to get back down to North Carolina, moved to Charlotte, which for me was always this city on a hill, growing up in rural North Carolina, about an hour north of there. And then after the 2016 election, everything just kind of changed. It was like, okay, well, I've always been passionate about politics, always been pretty involved, but we got to do more. I have to do more. And after the 2016 election, they redrew some maps in Mecklenburg County, and at the time it's wild that Mecklenburg County was almost 50-50 Republican and Democrat in the General Assembly. And when they redrew the maps, it made a lot of South Charlotte districts much more competitive. And it was kind of wild because I literally just moved back to North Carolina. I just moved back to Charlotte. And even though I knew a lot about politics in North Carolina, I didn't have those local connections. And it was really just kind of wild that it all turned out that the Valentine area needed a Democrat to run, and they really couldn't find anybody. And I said, I'll do it. It was an incumbent Republican who won by about 10 points 2 years earlier, and so I said, we'll do it. We'll take the shot at it. And so we decided to run, and we were able to pull it off. We were able to flip it. And so I've been in the state house ever since then. So it's been quite a journey.
So now you touched around a lot of this, but most people, whenever they run for office, they have that one thing, that thing that really was like, this is the breaking point moment. And I heard a few of those in there, kind of the influence to why you were interested in this at all, and then maybe some of the climactic moments. Was there something that really kicked you off, the passion that said, I'm going to trade in my life as not in the public eye to constantly being under supervision of others and putting myself out there? What was that moment for you?
It was a combination of things. Like, I left North Carolina in, May 2009 when I went to grad school. And, that's that's very close. And then obviously in 2011, Republicans took over the state. And so, that's when it started, because, growing up, like South Carolina was the butt of all the political jokes. And look how crazy they are down there. And I remember when I moved to South Carolina, I was like, oh God, I can't believe I'm moving. But then as soon as I moved to South Carolina, North Carolina started taking the cake for that. And it all kind of culminated with HB2. I was up in Boston when they passed that, and it was just, it's just like this is national news.
Yes.
I was, up there, like, I shouldn't be hearing about North Carolina politics when I'm living in Boston, but it was just such a slap on the face for our state. And so, like, it was like that's what's got to do it. And then honestly, it was Trump getting elected in 2016, and our continued failure to break the supermajority of just like we can't do this. And personally, like, being an economics background, it frustrated me so much to have, Pat McCrory called it the Carolina comeback. And it just frustrated me so much that they were doing that by rolling back all the investments that made North Carolina what North Carolina was. That, we didn't form Research Triangle Park through tax cuts. We did it through strong, smart investments and collaboration, not attacking, collaboration with our business community and our people. And I just saw, all that going away, and I'm like, we're still coasting on these past investments, and at some point those cracks are going to start showing. We're actually seeing that now, like these cracks are showing. And so all that culminated in 2016 of just like we need better people up there. We need people who understand what North Carolina was, understand what North Carolina can be, and understand that if we want to continue to grow long term, we have to invest in our people. We have to invest in our communities. And everything I'd seen had been just such short-term fixes, that's good applause lines, and we were trading off those long-term investments that's really going to pay dividends 10, 20, 30 years down the road.
Your campaign website says you're our nerd for North Carolina Treasurer. Now, as someone who is often described as nerdy or nerd adjacent, that's a pretty big claim on your part. What are your nerd credentials?
Well, I am the only PhD economist in the state legislature, and I'm a nut for the wonky details. Because when you run, how it happens in the legislature, it's like everyone runs on the big things. You run on education, you run investments with your people. When you get up here, you got to specialize in something, so that when those issues come up, like you're the go-to person. That's how you kind of build credibility. And I love public finance. Like, it's interesting to me. And so, I studied it in graduate school. When I was working in the private sector, I did international tax stuff. And so I was naturally drawn to finance and some of the wonky things of, everyone wants to be on appropriations because, it certainly is more fun to be able to dole out all the money to your constituents. But, you can't dole out any money if you can't raise it. And when you tax things, that really does shape what the economy looks like.
Yeah.
And so I dove into that. It was a good specialty, and so I really like diving into the wonky minutia of everything that a lot of people gloss over when you start talking about it. But it's important. And lucky for me is that no one really wanted to do it that much, and so I was able to establish my background, establish my credentials early on. And so people start coming to me and asking me questions about stuff. Even Republicans start coming and asking questions about stuff. And so it's just you dive into a very, very specific niche area, and it's really fun. And I'm a huge history nerd. I'll barrage all my colleagues with some fun facts every now and then. And so I feel like I'm strong with the nerd force.
Yeah, I like that. That's actually where I was going to go next. I wanted to say first, where did you just come from as well? You came to this meeting from?
Yeah, I was actually just in the finance committee.
He's always working, everybody. Always working.
Yeah, so we were just in finance committee a second ago. So.
It never stops, does it?
Never ever.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you just said you're strong with the nerd force. I mean, are you a big Star Wars guy? Are you doing D&D? I mean, what you have a nice rock collection? Is there anything else nerdy that bolsters that?
I mean, I'm more like the policy wonk nerd thing.
Okay.
But, I love some Star Wars and some MCU in there. But,
I got you. I just wanted to kind of see where that was now. Now, in high school as a sophomore, I was my student council's treasurer. So, you and I have a lot in common. Tell us about the decision to run for North Carolina treasurer, because that has And in the last couple of months, the really big push we talked about right before we started your launch video. So just walk us through why you would want to transition from the representative job to run for the Treasury.
Yeah, and that's a great question because since I've been up here, no one knows what the Treasury does. You hear Treasury and you think of money, but like they have a pretty powerful role in state government. And one of the big frustrating things since I've been up here, since January 2019 when we got sworn in, is just our financing of our state government has been just bananas to me. Like we've had we've had a lot of cash, we've had a lot of money, which has been great. We had the lowest interest rates in history. We could have made transformational investments in North Carolina without having to raise a single dime in taxes. And not only that, like had we issued some debt, had we done some financing, not only would it allowed us to do more for the state, but with inflation now, with interest rates rising, we'd be paying back pennies on the dollar.
Yeah.
Like it would literally have been free money at this point in time. And when you invest through debt financing, which everyone does, if you ever have a mortgage, that's debt financing. You're not going to pay your house in cash. Most people don't buy their car in cash. They finance it over the lifetime of it. But North Carolina is a growing state. And a lot of this infrastructure investment we need to continue to grow, that's going to benefit, the people that live here, but the people moving in. And so by debt financing, it's pushing it off to the future, but that makes sure the people moving in, the one who are going to benefit from this infrastructure, the one who we need this infrastructure to allow them to come, that gives them some skin in the game. Because by paying for cash, we're all paying for future people coming to town, and particularly in rural areas like that gets hurt. And so seeing just the reluctance of our General Assembly to just not use what I consider common sense financing for some of our biggest needs kind of drove me into looking at that. And a lot of that comes from the Treasurer's office. They have really poisoned the well of scaring people away from debt, and on the side, like no one loves debt, because they compare it to credit cards, but it's not credit cards because North Carolina has a balanced budget. We can only have debt. We can only issue debt for big projects, big investment projects. Any debt we issue has to be approved by the voters. And so it's not like we're maxing out our credit card like the federal government does in a lot of situations where they can just spend as much as they want. We're constrained. We're constrained to what the people want us to do. And the people need those investments. And so that was a big thing that kind of drove me to it. Our current treasurer, I feel like, had played a lot of politics with stuff, and we need the treasurer shouldn't be in the news that much. They should go in there and make sure our books are balanced, make sure we're doing what we need to do. And so it's just there's a lot of impacts that just strong, smart financing can do for our state. And also I view the treasurer as a mouthpiece for what North Carolina can be economically, of how strong our investments can be in our community. And I think Democrats in particular need someone who can go statewide and put this vision out. It's like, listen, this is what we need. Like, y'all need new roads. Like, let's talk about why DOT can't afford anything. Because we have a financing source that is limited to the gas tax, which is, it's not giving us the money we used to give. But we're prevented from actually using all this other money that we have in the general fund from really making these investments. And so these are tough choices. These are tough decisions, and we need forward-looking leaders to focus on those. And I consider myself a regionalist anyway. I live in Charlotte now. I represent Charlotte. I've loved my time in Charlotte, but I also grew up in rural North Carolina, and so I view this as a full state. And there's a lot of things that maybe in particular my district may not like, but could benefit the entire state. And so running on the statewide level, I think just gives you much more of a platform to really put down a vision for what North Carolina can be. And so that's what's always driven me to the treasurer's office. My background fits it well. Being in economics, running the pension plan. We've had a very poor performing pension plan because most of our assets are in cash. Compared to other states. And so, we got to be aggressive. We got to be aggressive. We got to invest our pension plan. We got to make sure our retirees have a good retirement. We got to make sure our state employees have a good benefits package. And so, because it all fits together. If you shirk on any one of those things, then it's just a domino effect that's really going to hinder the long run ability of North Carolina to be its greatest self.
Thanks to a lot of legislation that's been passed by the Biden administration, states are flush with cash right now. I mean, they have massive amounts of money laying around. So you mentioned this a little bit, as the state treasurer, you would have access to a lot of that funds and some direction over it. Priorities as a treasurer, I mean, you would have weigh and say over some of that money. What would be the areas of emphasis? You've talked a little bit about your background rurally, and there's been so much talk about broadband and that sort of thing. I mean, what are areas of contention for you looking at where those funds could go?
Right, and a lot of it is, long-term investments in economic development. And, broadband is one of the big things. We've done a lot in recent years in terms of allocating money for it, but there's still large parts of our state that don't have broadband. Yes. And, a lot of that's driven from the fact of how we're allocating the money. We're giving it to the businesses and say, hey, we'd really love it if y'all put some broadband in the ground. But, our legislature has prevented broadband from being a public utility, which, that's how we electrified the South in the Great Depression. It's just like, this is a utility. The government needs to have a role in it. The government is the one that can actually put that broadband in the ground and make sure that people have access to it as fast as possible. And so obviously that's something that's going to need a legislative fix to it, but making sure we have those investments because, the things you need for an economy to grow, particularly in rural areas, is you need access to the internet. That's the biggest thing, because that, what COVID showed us in this move towards remote working is you can work from anywhere. You don't have to live in a city. You can work from home and be connected to the global economy and be connected to all those opportunities, but you have to have the access to it, and you have to have a reliable internet access point to do that. And so that's the key thing. And then you got to get schools and healthcare. We talk about Leandro funding a lot on the state level, which, operating expenses are important, teacher pay is important, but our school capital needs are dwarfed. They dwarf the Leandro plan in the sense that I think at the high point, the Leandro plan was maybe $2 billion, maybe $2 to $3 billion. We have over $10 billion of school capital infrastructure needs. We don't talk about it a lot because the way our governments function, we push that onto county governments to fund. And so whenever your county does, they're the ones who do most of the school bonds, but it hasn't always been that way in the sense that the state has in the past done statewide school bonds to really promote this level of construction. We haven't done one since the mid-90s. And, that greatly hinders the ability of our rural communities to grow because, if you have schools that are falling down, if you don't have the infrastructure, if your science classes don't have the technology to really, have that cutting edge, computer systems that the kids need to learn, if they're going to succeed in college and be in line, it doesn't matter. You're not going to have people wanting to move to those areas because they're like, well, the school systems aren't great and my kids aren't going to have the opportunity. I went to an underfunded high school. I was able to get into Carolina, which was great, but I was so woefully unprepared when I got to Carolina because there were things my high school couldn't compete with because they just didn't have that infrastructure in place. And so, I think it's past time that we do a statewide school bond to really help these rural communities because another thing about them, they're not growing. Charlotte's growing, Wake County's growing, Durham's growing, Guilford, the Triad is growing, and so they have that property tax base to be able to finance the investments they need. But our rural areas that are declining in population, their property tax rate is already some of the highest in the state, and they're capped out and they're taxed out, and so they don't have that capital to be able to make those investments. And they are investments. They are investments that will entice more people to come there and work there. And so if we don't do that, they're just going to continue to fall further and further behind. And if that happens, their opportunity goes away. Yep. And our urban-rural divide continues to grow apart. And I truly believe that is what's driving a lot of the polarization in politics now is that too many people are being left behind.
Yes.
And we as Democrats aren't going out to those areas and communicating with them a path forward. And so we're losing them. And if we really want to build a coalition going forward, we got to go to these areas. We got to say, listen. When life comes at you, the state of North Carolina is going to have your back. Our people are going to have your back, and we're going to invest in you. We're going to invest in your future. We're going to invest in your communities.
Yeah, I think sometimes a lot of that gets lost in the shuffle because many of the people watching this live in urban areas. I mean, a lot of them are left-leaning or Democrats, so they're in urban areas. They're probably watching this on fiber. So sometimes a lot of those things you talk about kind of slip through and seem more of like a thing you hear about but you not really see, but it's a very true thing. My grandparents themselves live in a rural area just south of here in Harnett County, and their internet speeds are 3 megabytes, not 3 gigabytes. I call their internet service provider, they say they don't sell a plan with that little, and they will not pay to run the line to them to get them. So I mean, that means that someone like myself could never live there. A young person that's driving our young people away out of our rural areas, which like you said, continues that divide. It leaves people behind, their parents and grandparents who just don't work in those sorts of jobs. It means you can't live anywhere but an urban area.
And I think, ultimately what it does, it's the cascading effect. And Democrats need to be better at this, of understanding, our message works really great in urban and suburban areas, but, it doesn't work in rural areas. And what we have to understand is the sheer economic anxiety that's going on in these areas of, we can't paint a lot on the greater good. When you talk about the environmental movement, climate change movement, like those are things that we have to tackle, but you can't care about the greater good until your own good is taken care of first. And if you have huge swaths of people who are worried about where their next paycheck is going to come from, are worried if they're going to be able to make rent, they're not going to care about the environmental movement. They're not going to care about climate change. They're not going to care about a lot of these big, broad social issues that are important when they're too busy trying to struggle to survive. And I think a lot of us miss that, and that's why we need to focus on a better economic message of just going into these areas, talking to these people, talking to these communities, and just empathizing with what they're going through. And if we want to solve these problems, we have to take care of the economics first. We have to make sure that they are, that they're at ease, that they're at peace. Like in my mind, we need a peace of mind agenda, because if you don't have that peace of mind, you simply can't worry about other people because you're too busy worried about yourself. It is no coincidence that the civil rights movement and the environmental movement first took off in the 1960s and early 1970s. That was the peak of the middle class in America. Yeah. That was the peak of kind of economic security that everybody had, when it was like, okay, now that we're good, we can start, we have some money, I'm pretty stable. I would really like it if we didn't have all this acid rain. It turns out it's nice if we take lead out of our paint. And so people start saying, okay, well, now that I'm okay, I can start focusing on these bigger societal issues. And I think we've gone away from that. And when you don't empathize with that and understand where people are coming from, of listen, I love to care about that, but I can't right now. I'm too busy drowning myself. And then our messaging seems like attacking of these groups and of these communities. And we're never going to build the coalition we need and we have to have in order to take our state back, unless we connect on them on a level that makes them understand that we understand what they're going through.
Maybe a reality we don't want to face, but it is a reality sometimes, yeah. Now, I want to talk about public education a little bit, because you mentioned your mother was a public educator, so I'm sure that the work that has been going on in the opposition party to defund our schools has had a very personal impact on you, given that. If you just look at since the establishment of our public school systems, the rates of literacy and wage earnings have just gone through the roof since then. So it's been a clear, as you said, investment, not just spending money. You are a PhD economist. Can you tell us how short selling our young people is detrimental to our future?
It goes back to, when you don't have a good school system, that you're not going to have long-term economic opportunities in those areas. And, a lot of our economic engine in the past 10 to 15 years has been focused on importing talent. Yes. And, they come here because it's cheap. Our weather's nice. Our land value is cheap. It's getting more expensive if you're in some of the urban areas. But, we have a good comparative advantage in that. But we're not home growing our talent as much anymore. And so anything that relies on importing stuff from other states, importing talent from other states, it's not a long-term solution. And it is only going to continue until basically we get as expensive as other states, because so many people are here. And how do we prevent doing that? Investing in infrastructure, investing in education. So you have to be able to home grow your talent, because that's how you get that long-term growth. Because if you don't do, that's what's sustainable. It's not sustainable to continue to just picking people off. You have to have that, because that's what's going to drive that long-term investment. And so, it's just like, if you look at any businesses, if you look at the business that have been around for 100, 150 years, and not just fly-by-night enterprises, that they are constantly on the cutting edge. We're great now. We have a product that people like. We have a product people are selling, but they don't go all in on that. and expect long-term success. They're just like, okay, we're good here. Let's look towards the future. Let's invest a lot of our earnings into R&D. Let's make sure we have the next best thing. Because if you're not on that cutting edge, if you're not making those long-term investments, then every success that you have is going to be short-lived. And I think that's what's missing in our outlook towards education right now. It looks great. Choice sounds great. It's great when you're like, yeah, parents should be able to send their kids wherever they want. I was like, that is great. But you know what parents should also have? They should also have a local school that is funded by their tax dollars that is top-notch. It is not a choice when you are purposely sabotaging one of those choices so that you can pump more money into private schools owned by your buddies. It's a false choice. We are responsible for the public schools in North Carolina. And if you want to have school choice, great. But you got to do everything you can to make sure it is a true choice and not undercutting the only school system that so many people actually can rely on. Because again, you have choice, but if you're in Charlotte and you want to go to a school across town because that may be better, you have to hope that you have a parent that can drive you across town that isn't working a 9-to-5 job or an hourly wage where they can't take off. If they can't do that, then you have to go to your local school. And it is up to us and our government to make sure that that is the best possible school as possible. And, because if we don't do that, that takes away the economic opportunities of these areas. And, when people don't have those opportunities, that's what makes them lose faith in our system. That's what makes our economy unstable, and that's what makes our democracy unstable. And so it is just, we're coasting on for the short term, but we're losing the vision of the long-term implications of this. And we're finally starting to see those cracks appear. And, it's getting to the point where we don't have a lot of time to be able to come together and fix this before kind of the whole thing falls apart. So that's what worries me the most. That's what keeps me up at night when I'm thinking about we have to fix this and we have to fix it soon.
This is the big one, and a dark one as well. You cited HB2, the bathroom bill, as a motivation for running for state house. While that law isn't what we talk about most today, it's just been in the past few weeks that the Supreme Court has overturned their own rulings on extreme partisan gerrymandering, a voter ID law that would disproportionately affect minority voters. Republicans in the legislature now have the votes to override the governor's veto, pass whatever the things we've been seeing sweeping in other states, abortion bills, anti-LGBTQ bills that have been sweeping all over the place. Mark Robinson could be our governor at the end of next year. Are you more concerned about our state now than whenever you first ran in 2018?
I am, and it's because we thought 2018 was going to be the start of something great.
Yeah.
One giant step forward with all this ground in front of us for us to keep going. It was a jump start we needed. We picked up about 10 seats, I think, in the state house. I think maybe 6 or so in the state senate, and it's this is great, setting the stage for 2020. And it didn't happen. We took a step back in 2020. We took another step back in 2022. And so we're kind of back where we were in 2016. And so it worries me in the fact that so much bad could happen if we don't win in 2024. But I'm also optimistic in the sense that 2018 brought in a huge swath of new leaders for North Carolina. It was a younger generation, people with different backgrounds, and we had a great freshman class in 2018. And, as time goes on, we get more and more new people into the legislature. So I'm optimistic at the talent we have. We just have to go out and win. And, it's going to take, especially with gerrymandering coming out, we have to be real about what the political geography of our state looks like. I know y'all done a lot of work on political geography. Actually, my dissertation was on political geography, and we got to understand that. And we focus so much on these statewide races, and I'm running statewide, so I myself am focusing on a statewide race. But you have to have a plurality of the votes, but you gotta have a geographic coalition as well. And that's true for North Carolina. It's true for America too. The Senate is not going anywhere. North Dakota is still going to have the same number of senators as California. So is South Dakota, and so often, we focus on that. What's our win number 50% plus 1, that's our win number. That's good for a single race, and that's good for a statewide race. But we will not be able to take North Carolina and take back our legislature unless we win 58% of the vote. And that sounds wild, and it sounds tough, and it is tough. And so we have to have a message, and we have to have a platform that is all-encompassing. And so, because that's what it's going to take. Because, North Carolina, our statewide officials don't have a lot of power. Our legislature has all the power. But our statewide campaigns aren't focused on the legislature. And so we need to have that investment down ballot. We need to focus on these legislative races, make sure we get people running in every single community, because that's what's gonna drive it. Because again, you can take a statewide race, but if you don't take the legislature with you, just like shortchanging education, it's gonna be a short-lived success. And you have to focus. It is mathematically impossible for Democrats to win the legislature and lose any statewide race. And we got to play Moneyball on this. We gotta send it where it is. And so it's not as big ticket because people don't pay attention to the legislature as much as they're starting to. But that's what the Republicans started doing. And it wasn't in 2010. They started this in the 90s. Of investing in these things. And so we have to have that long-run approach, and we have to focus on a geographic coalition. Because if we don't do that, it's we're not going to be able to govern. Like, it's not about winning elections. It's about governing. And you cannot govern. I don't care what party you're talking about. You cannot govern with 50% of the vote. That's not how America was designed. That's not how our institutions were designed. And that's a good thing. Because you shouldn't be able to get 50% of the vote and be able to wipe everything out. You need to get more than that. You need to get a plurality, and you need to get a geographic coalition. And that is what we need to focus on. And so, while I'm scared about what could be, I'm also optimistic because we have that potential. We have that ability to take back this state. We just got to go do it.
I want to close with this. It's going to start off dark, but it's going to get brighter, I promise. These have been dark days for Democrats in North Carolina. Even all across the country, look at places like Montana and Tennessee. It just seems like nothing but bad news. Even from my fellow associates and people who are also members of Gen Z, you've already started to hear rumblings about relocating, which is something you never want to hear, the sort of brain drain that would cripple our state's economy and stunt our future. What good news is there amongst all of that? I mean, there's just a sense of doom that comes out of a rogue legislature and a reactionary Supreme Court, but people are still choosing to come here despite that because they know that there's something else offered. There's still growth being had, and there is still a future that can be achieved. Can you, for the people at home who are worried and who are afraid, what message can you give them that there is another option and that there isn't this path we're following down isn't a one-way street?
Yeah, and it's not. Like, the good news is that things are still, for the most part, fairly good in North Carolina. We have a good, strong economy. People are still continuing to move here, and so it's not like we're starting from ground zero of, okay, we're an underdeveloped economy, people aren't moving here, we're hemorrhaging people. Like, we're still bringing people in. And so that's resources that are coming in, that's people that are coming in. And so, like, that's the optimistic point of that. Like I said, like, there are cracks in the foundation that are starting to show, but things haven't started falling down yet. And so that means there's still time to fix these things. And so we just have to go out and sell it. That's what we have to do. We have to sell it across the way. And so, demographics, I don't like to say demographics are destiny, because they're not, because, political coalitions change all over the time, and hell, just in 2012, like, no one would have thought, suburbanites would have been a solid base of the Democratic Party just 4 or 8 years later. And so things are always changing. So we have to be flexible, but, there is potential. And we still have that, we still are a great state. We got mountains, we got the coast, we got great cities, we got amazing universities. We just have to double down on those investments that made North Carolina what North Carolina is. And if we can do that, and we can do it in the next 2 years and make some headway in 2024 and beyond, then we can really show people what North Carolina is and what North Carolina can become.
Well, I want to, first of all, thank you for your time, for being here. And I want to wish you best of luck from one certain nerd to another. Go show them what you can do.
Absolutely.
We really do appreciate it. We wish you the best of luck.
All right. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
For all of you at home, we say thank you for tuning in. Go look at our bank of other interviews we've done and keep tuned for the ones in the future. We so much appreciate your support and your continued watching of these. So until next time, we'll see you then. Thanks.